Hello, this is Model Omega, and welcome to the next part of my Newcomer's Guide to Thracia 776. And now, Chapter 4, The Dungeon. Quite aptly named, if you ask me. As previously stated, your entire party sans Leifus has been left behind, and even then, they are split up into different cells that must be broken into. Your inventory has also been spread wildly and randomly into 13 of the 16 chests dotted around adjacent rooms, with other items in the remaining 3. And if that wasn't enough, there are civilians you have to help escape, with a Gaiden chapter waiting if you manage to get all of them out. And you will, because that Gaiden is probably the most important one in the game. At the moment, your saviors and current controllable units are 3 members of the Magi group, so let's get to know them. Brighton is an Axe Knight, but since this and the next 2 chapters are all indoors, he is currently relegated to swords, though he can thankfully use them almost just as well as axes. His stats are basically garbage, as you can see, but Brighton has Wrath, which heavily makes up for most of that. He will likely be your main or secondary heavy for most of what I like to call the Mancer escape sequence, but you will probably end up abandoning him afterwards because of his likely bad stat growth. But even then, Wrath is nothing to sneeze at, so there's no shame in giving him some extra love to catch up, or continuing on if he ends up good. Makua is your first Myrmidon, or mercenary. Look, they didn't exist as separate classes until the next game in the series, and the translators don't agree on what they're called here. Anyway, compared to later sword fighters you get, Makua is kind of bland. She has ambush and a PCC of 3, which is nice, but her strength is so bad she relies on critical hits more than anything else to deal damage, and a PCC of 3 just won't cut it there. Makua does get a unique promotion to Hero instead of Swordmaster though, which gives her axe access, making her, if I recall correctly, the second female axe user in all of Fire Emblem. But her build is just so poor she'll never really be able to use them well. Makua is not bad, she's just overshadowed by later units, but for now she does her job well. Laura is the second of 3 thieves you get, and boy, her durability is even below wet tissue paper level. Her lockpicking skill is pretty much her only notable feature for now, as she probably won't even be able to hurt anything with 0 strength, and her minuscule build makes her terrible at stealing anything that isn't weightless. However, Laura gets a very unique secret promotion down the line that pretty much redeems her in usefulness terms, so keep her around for that. As for this chapter, essentially you should proceed through the prison in a clockwise fashion, unlocking and clearing each room in turn. Start with the lower right chest room, and use both Laura's thieving and Makua's chest key to go through it quickly, then unlock Leifus' cell. He makes buddies with the 3 brigands inside who somehow smuggled in axes and vulneries, and once freed they will swarm the nearest enemies, which will keep them off your back as you free your allies, though they will leave after some time. Remember that all of your captive units start with no inventory, so spread some weapons around so they can defend themselves. Makua and Brighton have extra swords they can lend, and since Laura can't really do anything with her slim sword except not get instantly captured, feel free to have her relinquish it if you need to. Eventually, you'll make it to Leif's cell, where you will get 2 new allies to help you escape. This Celestian is your first flying unit, and is also the only one you'll have until Chapter 14. She's super fast, lucky, and has good magic like most Pegasi riders, but her strength and defense leave something to be desired. Being stuck indoors for so long does limit her to swords for now, but this can actually benefit her, as Karen can become an excellent user of magic swords should you eventually get her rank up to B. Honestly, she isn't a super great unit, but flyer utility will be sorely needed, so I would encourage you to go out of your way to make her great. In this particular run, I ended up giving her the Wrath Scroll and the Leg Ring, and I never regretted it. Fergus McDonnell here is easily among the greatest units in the game, and he does this without any real unique weapon, great stats, an amazing skill, or huge bases. It's all in that magic PCC number, 5. To say Fergus is a crit machine is an understatement. Just think of this, at base skill with just a support from Karen, Fergus Kirkpatrick's critical hit rate on double attacks is 85%. Imagine what he can do with a killer sword. Hell, with a slim sword, his crit rate breaches 100% on all double attacks. All Fergus really needs to maintain his superiority is enough speed to consistently double, and thankfully you get the perfect tool for that next chapter. I shouldn't have to clarify this, but you should definitely use Fergus Abernathy. Anyway, Leif, Karen, and Fergus McDougal need weapons to defend themselves with, so arm them with whatever you have. Hopefully you've liberated some swords from the chest by now. Continue going clockwise to the top left. Now you should focus on rescuing the civilians. All you need to do is open their doors, and the civvies will walk to the nearest staircase on the left or right and escape. but from around turn 7 to 20, you'll get soldiers popping up by the left staircase, and one on the right for around the same amount of time. Adding to this is that soldiers will pour in from the south for a staggering amount of turns. I think it can go all the way up to 80 if I recall correctly, but they are mostly there to just waste your time. To make sure the civilians escape unharmed and without capture, you either need to block the spawn tiles or place units so that they block the enemy attacks. Let me reiterate here, you need to save all of the civilians to go to the guide in next chapter, and you really want to go to that extra chapter. After getting all of the chests and saving all the civilians, you'll need to proceed to the north room and escape. But first, here's a recommendation I'll make. If you followed my advice from last chapter, you should have a Fire Sword and Armor Slayer, two weapons that will be invaluable in dealing with the many armors that lie past the locked room and at the start of the next chapter. Right now, only Leif will possibly have a B rank and swords to use them. But Fergus is only 20 weapon experience from a B rank, which is essentially taking out 10 enemies or just 20 attacks. Soldiers spawn from the bottom staircase for 60-ish turns, so farm them for a bit until Fergus gets his B rank. His ability to use the Slayer or Fire Sword will be of immense help in the next couple chapters. During all this chaos, don't forget about your Crusader Scrolls as well. Always trade them to units that are about to get level ups, as every little bit helps. And try to steal vulneries with Leifus and Lara when you have the space and time. One other thing, if you get the chance, try to capture a soldier with a short lance. Pegasus Riders cannot use swords when mounted in this game, despite the fact that they did so finely in Genealogy. And you don't want Karen to be stuck without a weapon come chapter 6, where you go outside. You will have other opportunities to capture lances in the next 2 chapters, but just keep this in mind. Once you have everyone in position to assault the northern room, open the door with Leifus or Lara, and then immediately rescue them. Move Leif on the left side of where the door was and equip him with an iron sword, while putting Fergus on the right with the fire sword. If you brought the Brave Axe and Hammer with you, make sure they are in Leif's inventory, as he is in the position where he will be attacked by Dulcin, whom Leif talks to in order to recruit, assuming you saved Yuval last chapter. Fergus is going to be your heavy on the right, clearing away as many armors as you can with the fire sword. Unfortunately, you can prepare all in the world for this battle, but it is somewhat luck of the RNG. If you survive the turn intact, have Leif speak with Dulcin to recruit him, and then have him take the axes from Leif so he can kill the armors no problem. Dulcin is in an unfortunate stance as far as armored units go. Thracia hates armors. I'm not kidding. The game throws so many hammers into the hands of mid to late game enemies, it stops being funny and makes you wonder if someone felt wronged by Hannibal's recruitment back in Genealogy of the Holy War, but I'll have more to say on ridiculous general recruitments later. Anyway, Dulcin as a unit is not very good. Armor hate from the game aside, his stats are not super great, and even though he has a great defense base, his growth in it is surprisingly low. Thracia 776 is just not a game for tanks, but for right now, Dulcin is your only axe user, and he is your most reliable capturer of enemies thanks to his high build. But past chapter 7, Dulcin just doesn't really do enough to justify his own existence. Right, so with Dulcin on your side, you should try to mop up as many of the units here as you can. In particular, the mages are quite threatening to any of your units, so try to get rid of them first. Other than that, keep supporting units in range and don't hold back. Use all the best gear you have on you to take out the armors. In particular, the bow armors are likely your biggest worries, as the javelin and hand axe using mooks have much lower accuracy. Once all the enemies are finished, steal or capture the heal staffs from the 2 priests inside, as you can never have enough and you'll get a fine healer in chapter 5. When you are done, have everyone escape through the red arrows. Remember, Leif must go last, otherwise you will lose whoever is left behind. Up next, a pretty terrifying onslaught, but also one of the best units you'll have, and some of the best items you will ever acquire. All worth the hassle involved.